We are joined right now by Kings General Manager Rob Blake. After Rob's media availability, we will have Mark Yannetti as our guest to wrap up day two and to wrap up the 2020 NHL Draft from our end. Rob, first and foremost, thanks again for joining us. Maybe just initially, big picture, round two is complete. Just your basic general thoughts.
I think overall, you kind of go into it with a game plan on, like I said, Mark does layers, does a lot of different things, and you kind of select different players to fit in different areas where you think are going to be available. As the draft unfolded, it was very close to Mark's final list. So the area of movement may not have been as easy as we would have hoped at different times, but we're able to do a couple different things during the day.
A quick note for the media. One change is, as opposed to typing in the question in the Q&A, if you could please text me your question just from my end in a text standpoint. It's just a little easier for me to reach the text. So again, please text your questions to me. Rob, obviously, we also earlier this morning made a trade with the Rangers. If you could touch upon that a little as well.
Yeah, Elias Anderson was a player we looked hard at a few years ago in the draft. And we were real familiar with him, having his father as one of our scouts in Europe for a number of years now. The relationship he had with his former team for whatever reasons, didn't seem to really be a great fit. So when we got to that certain layer of the draft, we were looking at the ability to get that high-end talent for what he was drafted originally for, proved to be something that was beneficial to us at that time, added some value to what we were doing for the overall day.
I mean, obviously you're not around him on a daily basis, needless to say, while he was with the New York Rangers. But as you kind of watched from afar and kind of honed in on making this decision, can you maybe touch upon his time with the Rangers and why you think he might be a good and or better fit here in LA?
Yeah, I think, and like I said, a lot of that work was done draft year. Christian Ruutu has followed him his time that he spent in Sweden since that, previous to it. So, but like I said, I think the value we were looking at when we were picking at that selection, to give him a fresh start and come in here and battle for a job would be intriguing to his point also.
I think he touched upon when he took some questions from the media a couple hours ago. He's talked to Christian, he talked to his dad, but I think he mentioned during the interview that his dad didn't know about the trade. Is that just kind of talk a little bit about that dynamic, and also in a typical draft moment, Nick would have been sitting 10 feet away from you.
Right, with the virtual, we had all the scouts on a Zoom or a Teams call in the background, but a lot of times the volume was different because of what was going on the draft board and different things. So, we had made a call to Christian Ruutu a little earlier today. I just wanted to double check on his opinion and where he stood in that value. I know he's very close to Nick in that aspect, so we kind of left Nick out of it, understanding that it was his son until the very last moment.
Touch upon the work of the staff, a unique summer, a unique draft, just kind of being part of it within the organization. And clearly everyone stepped up and did a great job.
Yeah, it had its challenges in the fact of meetings leading up to the draft seemed to focus more on different areas rather than the whole group. We just found that if you included the whole group on a Zoom call or a Teams call, it was tough to get the communication. So it was much more like breakout groups, and then trying to merge everything. There was challenges in that. Give the staff full credit for putting the work in, the extra work, the delayed work, the debates. There's not a clear consensus when you go into this with different players. But I think the respect between them and understanding everything that we had to deal with, Mark organized a terrific draft, a terrific plan leading into it, and we tried to execute best as we could the last couple of days.
With Mark, obviously, we'll get a little more in focus on some of the draft picks from today, but do want to touch upon the two trades to move up. Obviously, a couple of players that we felt very good about to make moves such as those.
Yeah, and I think what happens is you go home after the first round. Players or sorry, teams get to adjust their lists. Who's available. So there's a lot of excitement leading into the second round, and when you come back in and the jockeying for different positions, as you get deeper in there, it becomes very specific to players that you want. There may be not as many teams that are interested in that player just because of the abundance of it. So that movement, there are lots of calls early morning, the second round that kind of frame that workup.
I think my count here is 8 players today. I'm not going to put you on the spot of, all of them individually, but is there 1, 2, 3 of the kids that maybe you had a little bit your own eyes on a little more, or were involved in some way, maybe through a friend or an associate that, and ultimately they're now part of our organization?
Yeah, well, I think you involve that with all these players, even if it's calls, prior to the selection. So when you kind of narrow down there's 2 or 3 players, depending on what 4 or 5 teams ahead of you, there's, time between the rounds, you start making some calls just to do a little of the background check that to make sure it's in order with what we've already accomplished. So, a lot of the staff's involved in that, whether it's scouts or the other guys in the office here. If a name comes up and you're going to select in that certain area, a previous coach, somebody that may have played with someone that knew him, you do all that kind of fact check.
The Quentin Byfield pick was made 16, 18 hours ago. It was not public knowledge, up until the moment that it was announced. Just maybe any correspondence you've had with other general managers or talent evaluators since the pick was made that you would care to share?
Nothing really since then. There's a discussion, or you read the things about, whether you had discussion about moving the pick. We were focused on making that pick from day one, and we were very focused on Quentin from day one. So, as it turned out, that worked in our favor, and we went forward after yesterday.
Looks like we had a handful of questions here to remain. What stood out maybe to you about the defenseman that merited second round selections?
Well,
Being a fellow
yeah,
defenseman yourself?
yeah, yeah, defenseman, but also positional. There's needs within the organization. We understood that. We've drafted a lot of forwards at high end in the last few years. With Toby Bornfoot coming in the first round as a defenseman a year ago. So some of that comes into play. And a lot of times what happens is you get close to that second round pick, and you're looking at the possible defenseman that could be available depending on what somebody in front of you does, or even if that defenseman may be available at your next pick. So can you take the most effective forward? So that jockey, and Mark has a terrific job at that. Our communication and the way he interacts with our staff here has definitely improved over the years so that we can balance that out.
Dennis Bernstein asking, Rob, you said on the NHL Network that forward depth chart to start the season will look like it did at the end of last season. Anything you can expand on there?
Similar. I mean, I think you look at the players that don't require waivers. We iced a younger team near the end of the season, and I'm talking post trade deadline, with the exception being Jeff Carter, who was out with an injury but fully expected to make that return. So, we'll look at that. There's challenges for those kids to come in and compete and win spots and challenge, but we can also be a little bit patient if we feel they're not ready.
And finally, last question, free agency question. How can the team best take advantage of its cap space going forward in this year with a flat cap? And what opportunities do these circumstances maybe create?
Yeah, I mean, we have a little flexibility cap wise this year. We have some depth needs we want to address here in the next couple of days with free agency, and possibly explore something a little bit bigger. We don't have an exceptional amount of cap space this year. Understanding the flat cap, our big space starts a year from now. We understand that potential buyouts or previous buyouts and different things has led to some dead space in our cap situation, but we've been able to balance our roster going forward. So that space will definitely increase a year from now, and that may be when you look at different options.
I'm not there, but have the sense Jeff Solomon smiling somewhere close to you with all this cap space talk.
He's either smiling or frowning because I'm talking about it and doesn't want me to.
Fair enough. Rob, we thank you again for your time last night and again today, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Oh, you too, Jeff.
Thank you.